Hey everyone, it's Emily. My book I chose is Cheap Sex, The Transformation of Men, Marriage, and Monogamy by Mark Regardus, published by Oxford University Press 2017. So essentially this book explores the unintended consequences of the sexual revolution which Regardus attributes to availability of birth control starting in the 1960s. Additionally, pornography and online dating contribute to this idea of sex being cheap. So his key to the claim is that men's access to sex has made it more difficult for those women who want committed monogamous relationships to find partners that fit that whole package deal. Reganus believes that there are biological differences between men and women and how much their behavior is motivated by the desire for sexual satisfaction. So for me, it kind of made me just think of that whole argument of nature and nurture. Are we naturally inclined to these satisfactions, or do our satisfactions depend on the norms of the society at the time? Reganus uses the ideas from the exchange in sociology and market theories from economics. In this view, if I have something a man wants, I can get something from him in exchange for giving him what he wants. The more he wants it, the more I can get it. But what I can get is decreased if he has alternative partners who will give it with fewer conditions. So now using this in regards to sex, Reganus theorizes that because men want more sex than women will get something from men in return for sex. Traditionally, in the past, this has been for economic support and a committed relationship. A further implication is that what one woman can expect to get from her sexual partner depends on the conditions of what other women putting on their conditions for sex. So, with this invention of birth control, the risk of premarital pregnancy is diminished. The pill allowed women to delay marriage long enough to finish college and start a career. While this is something positive, there can also be a negative consequence of the pill. Since women are reducing the risk of pregnancy with freer sex, sex became cheaper for men, and this lessens the ability for women to find men that are willing to commit to a relational commitment before sex. So this is for two reasons. As the market and exchange theory implies, fewer men will now commit to exclusive relationships because, unlike the men of earlier eras, they can find women who will have sex with them with no such strings. And secondly, cultural. Once a lot of the people are having non-committal sex, the statistical norm becomes morally accepted. A woman holding out for a serious commitment before having sex is likely to be seen as a prude, and more likely to drop her prudity as to be seen as morally admirable. This thesis in turn depends upon the claim that men and women engage in exchange behavior regarding sex. He documents this exhaustively, showing that men and women have different sexual desires, preferences, and permissiveness, with men on average wanting sex more than women. So this is a telling example that he gives. Women generally never pay for sex. Women have what men want in this regard and are therefore the gatekeepers of sex. In a consensual relationship, sex begins with women when it decide it should. Previously, when women depended upon men's economic provision, women generally tended to withhold sex in order to secure commitment and marriage. Sex simply has become less consequential. In fact, because women are more scarce in the market for sex, they can command a higher price and feel very desired and appreciated, at least for a short time. They also increasingly perceive that if they want a longer romantic relationship and eventually marriage, perhaps they have better consent to sex to get the process started. In the marriage market, then, men are more scarce, especially because they do not want women's fertility constraints. As for porn, Reganus believes porn is the closing gap between the real and the fake sex. Porn is accompanied by masturbation, which is one of the most extreme cheap sexes that you can get. As for online dating, it's enabling people to sort of through sexual and romantic options more efficiently. In practice, it has become a remarkably efficient cheap sex delivery system. It's like a platter of people. Consensually, it discourages investment in any partner who seems imperfect and fosters overlapping sexual partnerships and keeping options open. Overall, my rating, I actually really did enjoy this book. I was curious to see how other people viewed this book, so I did a little research. I found that the book reviews were mixed in the public outlets. Some critiques support his arguments, and others were very critical of his argument, just like with any argument. But what I did find interesting was that this book became a piece of a national conversation about men, masculinity, and sex. Usually, when I read studies, I often have a hard time focusing because my interest is not always there. I found this book enjoyable and very relevant to read with the society that we live in today. I agree with Agnes, sex has become cheap. Women have started to demand less from men and in exchange for sex, and this has produced a world historical shift in crisis for gender, sexuality, monogamy, marriage, more in marriage more generally.